You're listening to a Faith Matters podcast.
Yeah, you're listening to Maree and Denise on Faith Matters, and we are now going to head into Denise's blog for this week, which she does on becoming unoffendable. You can find her on Facebook, denise.nz, or under Denise J. Gardner.
Yes.
I said something wrong, didn't I? She's looking at me sideways.
No,
I got it right.
I think you got it right. Denise.nz is the website. And you can link through to Facebook or Instagram or whatever from there if you want to.
Yeah, so you'll find, if you look through her website, you will find our podcasts on there. And for this week, Denise, your heading was, what about them? Wouldn't it be nice? And it starts out with, I had a great conversation on the weekend, one where a listener posed a question. I thought I'd write about it in a few weeks, but you've written about it this week, a bit early, but there you go. And so I thought we'd unpack it a bit. And the question was, wouldn't it, because Denise's blog is about becoming unoffendable, and I just emphasise the word becoming. We're not there, we probably never will be, but we are heading towards it. Yeah, this was the question posed to her. Wouldn't it be easier to be unoffended if the person wasn't being offensive? Right. No, that was a good question, Denise.
Well,
we wouldn't get offended if people weren't being offensive.
And true. Again, I'd like to just say a simple yes.
End of story, we're done. That was a good one.
That's so true. Well, it's true to a point, though, because even when people aren't being offensive, we can take offence because of our own stories and our own experience, and we jump to a conclusion that they never intended and they didn't even know it was a possibility, and yet we've gone and landed in this place that they might not even know that they were anywhere near.
Oh, well, just in our last segment in Faith Chats, I'm sure there were probably people offended in what was being said, but no offence was meant to be given. They're just stories and experiences of life. If we can't talk about our experiences, then, that's pretty sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There is a skill to listening to each other, but I guess what I went into when with the blog is there's a couple of things that jumped out at me, and often we don't have control over how another person behaves, but there can be a couple of traits that you might see in a person, and it becomes more than just an occasional, they're not just having a bad day where just one off they've done something, but this I'm talking about where this person has got to the point where they're just being offensive, like every time you see them you're like cringing, because whether it's a measure of pride that keeps coming out and actually they're only thinking about their own world, or the other thing that came up for me was when somebody takes the mickey out of somebody or has a joke or whatever, but they just won't let it go. And so they're trying to get what they would call a good reaction out of somebody. And that person is just so uncomfortable and just feels distressed. And the person doesn't pick up on their cues, and they just keep joking, keep mocking, keep laughing, keep whatever they were doing. And this person who's distressed just continues to spiral into just being upset because this other person just won't stop. They are genuinely being offensive. I guess your offensive versus your defensive. They're in offensive, they're going for it. And they just won't stop.
Hard people to be around. I mean, you can choose not to be around them if you get to know them well enough. Maybe that's about boundaries and who we allow in our lives and don't allow in, because, it can be detrimental to us, or it's causing great stress having that person in our life. And, but there are other characters too that you talk about. I think, some people just like to have a dig. They love to push buttons, or they want a reaction. And we need to take responsibility, I guess, for how we are towards other people. But people who do this don't often think like that.
Yeah.
They're just having a joke around, or they're just having a bit of a poke at something.
Yeah. And in their mind, it's entertainment or it's amusing, without them actually realising the implications for the other person on the other end.
Yeah, and the other person can often present themselves as, quite offended, or and start to become offendable. Offensive. Is that the word? We got so many O's here. It's like, which one are we? Because you'll take an offence, and then you'll start to try and, back yourself and give out a story to say why you did this, and you're suddenly all off track. And that's a horrible place to be in a hard conversation also to be in, because it's stressful and it usually ends in conflict.
Yeah. I think it's something when somebody has kind of got a way about them, they go about things a certain way. Sometimes we pick up on stuff, but it's actually, if we stopped and thought about it, we might realise that it's actually a trait that we have too. And sometimes we react to it so strongly in someone else because it's actually a mirror.
Oh, Denise, I read this in your blog and I thought, that's a goodie, eh? Because it is. It can be a reflection of ourselves. Oh, my gosh.
And we get so upset with them, but what we don't realise is that everyone around us is looking at us when we're really upset with this offensive person, and they are all thinking, but you do exactly the same thing. And so I didn't write this blog with a pointing the finger kind of an attitude, because every bit that I talked about, I can think of a story in my own life, I'm sure, where I have been just as obnoxious as that person was being.
Yeah, same.
We all have our moments where actually we're only thinking about ourselves, or we think this is really funny and someone else has ended up really upset.
Yeah, I think that's... Where do we take responsibility? I mean, we can get away with saying, I was just joking around, I was just having a bit of fun with you. And we can wipe, actually, the stress that's caused on somebody else's life away as though it doesn't matter. But actually you've had there's been I can't think of the word, Denise.
There are repercussions?
Yeah, to how we say things and how the other person receives that. So, what might be a moment of glee or joy for the person, having the poke, the other person has to digest that and sit with it. The other person walks away, it's just a bit of a joke, who cares? The other person is left with the damage that's been done.
And the thing, something like that, really, when you sweep something under the carpet, sort of pretend it never happened, it's like not appointing, according, whatever the word is that I'm trying to think of. It's not giving that thing value, whereas it was really important. Like, you just made that person feel humiliated, say, and actually that person has value. So the fact that they are feeling embarrassed or humiliated or whatever they're feeling, actually, you can't, or if you undervalue that, you're really not valuing the person. And so I think this sort of thing can often happen where there is a power imbalance. It will often be somebody who is in some sort of a position of influence over the other, that they just sweep it under the carpet. They know, if I don't do anything about it, nobody's going to do anything about it. And, sometimes it's just not fair.
Yeah. And we have to learn ways to deal with it. So I'm going to give out a bit of something you can do to help yourself.
Yay. I don't know if I even went there in this blog.
in these situations, like when somebody is being offensive to you, and you don't know what to do, and you can feel yourself reacting. And we talked about this a little bit in the last show on Faith Chats, and I talked about new ground. What is new ground and what does it look like? And I'm quite fascinated with new ground because it gives me a starting point. It gives me some place that I don't know what's going to happen here. It's new. And when we are coming up against somebody who is offensive or is poking and prodding and doing things, that are causing us great stress, what can we do in the moment? Well, sometimes it's good to step back from the problem, step back from the stresses that are right in front of us. And so how do we create a gap between that and making a different choice on how I'm going to react here? And so this is the new ground. And new ground, there's a thing called the naive inquirer. The naive, I might be saying it wrong, the naive inquirer. Yeah. So the picture of this person is kind of like what we get on the cards.
The Joker.
The Joker. He's got a cap on with a feather on it, and he's got, I don't know if he does that, but
bells on the end of his thingies.
He belongs in the courts of the old days of the castles and things like that, and he's a travelling person. And so he has a capsack on his back, and he's often travelling around. And the naive inquirer never engages with the stresses of life. They skip along the surface, so they have a curiosity and an interest in something. So to use this naive inquirer in your own life, it's to take on the words, I'm interested, I'm curious. Those are the two words to find new ground. Instead of being reactive, like we always have been or might always have been, then what we want to do is, like I say, create space in that. And so saying to yourself, oh, that's interesting that I feel like that. I wonder what that's about. Or I'm curious why that person reacted like that. I wonder what's going on for them. Right? And so it's about creating the space between what's happening and something new, something different coming from this. So that is for you to not react, but to give yourself a moment to have a curiosity about this or an interest, rather than, man, this guy really annoys me, or this woman really annoys me. I've got to have a piece of this person, got to let them know my mind right now. It's how do I step back from that reaction and give myself a space to breathe, to be curious and to be interested.
That is so fascinating because, again, I don't know if it's this morning or yesterday, I was reading something online and it was talking about a Japanese custom. So within a marriage, a husband and wife in Japan, they will create a space called Ma. It was M-A. And what that means is that when they are kind of feeling reactive against each other, they've had something's come up that they are clashing or have a different opinion or whatever, they just say one of them will say to the other, look, let's just have a little bit of space here. And what they do is they stay in the same place, like they might still be in the same room together, but there's no eye contact, there's no talking, and there's no phones, and they just are quiet to let their own nervous system catch up with their response and just settle, so that they come out of that sort of that fight or flight reaction. And then so it can be 3 to 7 minutes usually where their systems have now settled with each other, and now they can address that same topic and continue the conversation, but without all of the emotion that's bubbled to the surface. And I thought, wow, because so often when one or the other needs space in a relationship, the other person will go, oh, well, you're just being, passive aggressive, or I don't know what. But when you actually realise that there is this thing that they have in their culture, that it is creating space for both, that both of them come out of that reaction, so that now they're safe in each other's presence again. And now they can, so they haven't changed the subject, and they don't necessarily say, well, let's come back to this later, but they sit with each other while they calm down. And I'm just like, wow.
We could all learn to do that.
I know. How powerful would that be?
We bring that into our culture.
Can you imagine it? It might take us a little bit longer than 3 to 7 minutes at the beginning.
Well,
I don't
because
know.
we'll be stubborn. We won't want to sit there. Like, I'm not sitting with you. I'm not even in the same room as you. We're pretty gnarly, really. But, new ground means new experience. And this is a new experience. And where do we get to challenge ourselves with new experiences, or do we just want to keep playing out the same old patterns we've always had? I mean, do we want to stay the pokey person, or the argumentative one, or the, I was just joking, when they actually weren't, and they're trying to cause a reaction, do we want to keep those patterns going? Have they served us well? If you say yes, I'd like to know the extent of your friendship group. Are they still really friends?
Or actually, maybe you're just used to a certain type of atmosphere and that has become normal to you. But if you actually stopped and thought about it, what environment would you like to be in? Would it have the tension and the angst, perhaps, that you think is normal?
To be curious and to be interested, those two words, they are also attached to our nervous system when we say them. Like, we want to bring our nervous system down into a place where we can actually be back online, and to have a curiosity is that, well, you're not really attached to anything, you're just curious. Or to have an interest, it's like, well, I'm stepping back from this a little bit, I'm interested in it. And so our whole body responds differently to that than it would if we go in guns blazing and ready for the kill. I'm going to tell you what I think and what I thought about what you said and how wrong you are.
Oh, yay. What a conversation to look forward to.
So, how do we discover new ground? New ground is there every day, any time we want to pick it up. It's as simple as stepping into it, in your mind. Like, what's my new ground look like? Hopefully it's abundant and full of life and not some barren land, because that's not what we want to step into. We want to step into something that's going to feed us, good. It's going to feed and nourish us and help us to feel stronger in ourselves, not weakened.
When I was sort of bringing the blog to a close, I had this picture of a fire. And, we talk about creating a safe environment with the people that we're with. And with a fire, when a fire is in a safe environment with boundaries, whether it's just that it's a ring of stones outside and some pieces of wood that can burn, but they're not going to catch anything alight nearby. Fire can be helpful and useful, and it can be warming, and you can use it to cook and all these good things. And when it's within a safe area, there's no need to put it out. You can cultivate it, keep feeding the fire, and you want that to be there. But you think about a wildfire that has no boundaries, and it's a completely different story. And I think, when we're looking at a person potentially who is offensive, if we can keep good boundaries around them and go, okay, well, because they're offensive, I'm going to keep them in this safe space here, and they don't actually have access to this part of my world because they're not necessarily going to be safe in that environment. When we create boundaries around these people, we can manage them, whichever part of our lives they happen to inhabit. But it's when we have no boundaries, when that wildfire actually just goes, that's when things get damaged, people get hurt. That's when there needs to be some sort of a containment, because you just actually don't know what sort of destruction could happen. And so I think, when we're confronted with an offensive person, all we want them to do is stop, and that's just the reality of it. If they stopped being offensive, I wouldn't have to be offended, and that is true, except that you cannot control that person. The only person that you have any say over the way that they respond is actually yourself.
Yeah, and there's the new ground right there, because, you're right. We can't stop somebody being offensive, but we can stop how we are offended by that. And that is the point of difference that we're always looking for, is what is the point of difference? What can I bring to this that's not the same?
You've been listening to a Faith Matters podcast. If you have questions, email us on Faith Matters 98.1 FM at gmail.com.